We came back from Red Hollow, but something else came back with him. When Jake Navarro returns to his cursed hometown after nearly 2 decades, he finds more than buried memories waiting. Children whisper about the breathing earth. The church hides something older than faith, and the townsfolk, they remember too much and say too little. As Jake digs into his past, he unearths a pact soaked in blood, roots that think, and a hunger that never died. Some towns never forget, and some secrets never stay buried. Welcome to Red Hollow. They said he drowned, but someone kept hearing footsteps in his old room. The wind always spoke in Red Hollow, but no one ever listened long enough to understand. It scratched the windows, whispered through the siding of the old houses, and on that night, Friday, October 13, it did more than whisper. It howled, it screamed. Clara Gallagher had grown up with the stories. Every town had its myths, but in Red Hollow, they weren't just whispered by kids around a campfire. They were documented in Brittle County records, memorialized in crude wood carvings outside the church, and passed down by grandmothers with trembling hands and eyes that never quite looked straight at you when they talked about what lives in the roots. Clara never bought into it, not really, not until the boy came back. She stood at the edge of the woods behind the church, flashlight trembling in her grip. The trees loomed tall and black against the silver wash of moonlight. It wasn't her first time in this part of town. Hell, she'd snuck out here with friends a dozen times growing up. But tonight felt different, colder. Not the air, something else. "Clara," a voice hissed behind her. She turned. It was Mark Hill, backpack slung over one shoulder, sweat darkening the collar of his jacket. His eyes were wide, his breath white in the air. "You're sure about this?" "No," she said, "but I need to see for myself." Because 2 days ago, she got a phone call. A scratchy, static-filled message on her voicemail. No caller ID, just a whisper that said, "He's at the creek. He wants to come home." There was only one he that could mean: Logan Moore. Dead for 12 years. Her neighbor, her childhood friend, the boy who vanished in the creek behind the church the summer they both turned 11. They never found his body, only his red raincoat snagged on a rusted fence post by the water. Now someone was claiming he was back? She should have deleted the message. She should have blocked the number. Instead, she'd driven 6 hours from college, returned to the sleepy, moldy ghost of a town she swore she'd never see again. Because even after 12 years, even after all the therapy and the pretending, there was a part of Clara that never stopped listening for footsteps down the hall at 2 a.m. A part of her that dreamed of red raincoats and waterlogged lullabies. Mark followed her in silence as they crossed the overgrown clearing behind the church. The grass here grew tall and oily, almost black in the moonlight. The church itself loomed behind them like a sentinel, white paint peeled, the steeple cracked and leaning slightly, a crooked cross at its peak pointing not to heaven but toward the woods. No one used St. Ivor's anymore. It had closed after Pastor Rendell died, and no one had stepped inside since, not officially. But Clara had always suspected things happened there after dark. They reached the creek. It looked just like she remembered. Narrow, quiet, unnaturally still, as if time avoided touching it. "Clara," Mark whispered, grabbing her arm. He pointed upstream. There, just beyond the thicket of dying birch, was a figure, small, child-sized, standing barefoot in the mud, wearing red. Clara's breath hitched. She raised the flashlight and aimed it forward. The beam cut through the mist. The figure didn't move. Pale skin, wet hair, eyes that didn't reflect the light but seemed to absorb it. "Logan?" she whispered. The figure tilted its head. Mark stepped back. No way. "That's not..." But Clara moved forward. "Logan, it's Clara. Do you remember me?" The boy said nothing, just stared. Then he opened his mouth, not to speak, but to smile. A wide, unnatural grin that spread far too high, revealing not teeth, but something else. Small, black ridges, like barnacles, or the inside of something pulled from the sea. Clara stumbled back. The boy stepped forward, Mark grabbed her shoulder and pulled. "We're leaving, now." But she couldn't move. Something had rooted her to the spot. The creek whispered her name. The boy raised one hand and pointed, not at her, but toward the church. Then he vanished, not walked away, not faded. One moment there, the next, gone. The wind died, everything fell silent. Clara's legs gave out and she collapsed to her knees. Mark cursed under his breath, dragging her back toward the tree line. "We're done," he said. "I don't care what this is, I don't care what that thing was pretending to be, but we are not staying." They didn't talk again until they were back at Clara's rental car. She slammed the door and gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Thought was him. No, it wasn't. I know how crazy it sounds, Mark, but I saw his eyes, the way he looked at me. That was Logan, or something wearing him. Mark didn't respond, just stared ahead, jaw tight. Then he pulled something from his jacket pocket. A folded piece of paper. "What's that?" she asked. "I found it stuck to the church door yesterday morning. Thought it was just old graffiti, but..." He opened it. It was a page torn from the town's historical society brochure. The title read, "The Boy Who Came Back." Clara's stomach turned. She knew the legend. One of the oldest in Red Hollow. A child drowned in the creek back in 1894. Vanished for 3 days. Returned without a scratch. Clean. Too clean. His parents swore it was a miracle. Until he started killing the livestock. Until his mother was found with river mud stuffed down her throat and her arms torn out at the joints. Clara read the handwritten scrawl on the bottom of the page. "He comes back every 13 years. Always to someone who loved him." The flashlight in the back seat flickered. Outside, the wind rose again, and this time Clara understood what it was saying. He's not done. He's just begun. The wind didn't sleep that night. It knocked against Clara's windows like skeletal fingers drumming for entry, and every so often she swore she heard a second sound beneath it, wet feet dragging across the porch. The low croon of a child's hum, out of tune and maddeningly familiar. She didn't sleep, not after what she'd seen by the creek, not after the boy who wasn't a boy smiled with barnacled teeth, not after Mark handed her that yellowed, torn legend, the one her mother used to whisper when she was small and sick and scared of the dark. If he calls your name from the water, don't answer. If he knocks on the window, don't look. If he weeps like a boy, it's already too late. Clara sat on the floor of her childhood bedroom, back pressed against her bed, eyes fixed on the closed window. Her phone lay beside her, voicemail open to that same message she'd listened to 50 times by now. "He's at the creek. He wants to come home." The voice wasn't one she recognized. It was rough, male, old, like it had been dragged through gravel. There was something off about it, a distortion, as though whoever had spoken had done so underwater. She tapped play again. The voice rasped into her ear, and then, faintly, at the very end, something new, a whisper. She rewound, slowed it down. This time she caught it. "Tell Clara," she broke the chain, her blood iced. That line wasn't there before. She stood, heart pounding, and crossed to the window. The backyard stretched, dark and still. The trees swayed. The church's broken steeple peeked above them like a blade held ready. She thought of the photo still pinned on her corkboard. Logan and her, 3rd grade, soaked from a rainstorm, both of them laughing. He had mud on his chin. She remembered wiping it off. She remembered swearing they'd be friends forever. She had forgotten everything else. Until now, the town had. The school barely held an assembly when he vanished. No funeral, no memorial. His house was sold 6 months after. His parents moved to Michigan. But Clara remembered, and something in the woods remembered her. The next morning, she forced herself out. Dressed in jeans and a jacket, boots laced tight, she parked 2 blocks from the library and walked the rest of the way. The sidewalks were cracked, the shops mostly closed, but the town's archive room had survived time, and it had answers. Or so she hoped. Inside, the air was stale with dust and yellowed paper. She nodded to the librarian, a woman with clouded eyes who didn't ask why Clara was there. The folklore section was tucked in the basement, past the genealogy drawers and water-stained floor maps. She found what she needed on the second shelf, a slim, leather-bound journal labeled Folk Anomalies of Red Hollow in the St. Yver Creek region, compiled 193219141. She flipped to the index, the Hollow Boy. Pig, 47. Clara's fingers trembled as she turned the pages. The entry was short, a half-page sketch of a child, eyes dark voids, mouth sewn shut with symbols etched around his face. Beneath it, hand-scrawled notes. Comes every 13 years, appears as lost son, drowned child or beloved dead, returns clean, draws from grief, appears to the one who let go first. Break seals that hold him beneath the roots. Beneath that, in different handwriting, do not speak your name to him. If you remember his name, he is already inside you. Clara slammed the book shut. The chair beside her creaked. She turned. Mark was there. Jesus, you scared me. Didn't mean to, he said, holding a takeout cup. Brought you coffee. Figured you'd be here. She took it, thankful for the warmth in her hands. You really believe all this? He didn't answer right away, just stared at the old book, then back at her. I don't know what I believe, but I don't think that thing last night was just a hallucination. Clara leaned in. There's something worse, listen. She played the voicemail again. Mark's eyes narrowed. That line at the end. She broke the chain. What chain? Clara shook her head. Maybe something was keeping it out. Maybe there was a pattern, a ritual, and I undid it. You think it's your fault? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Outside, the town bell rang. It hadn't rung in 12 years, not since the day Logan vanished. Clara and Mark froze. They ran outside. The bell in St. Ivor's steeple clanged again, loud, off-pitch, wrong. And then they saw the crowd. A small group, 6 or 7 people, standing silently in front of the church, all elderly, all dressed in black. One of them raised a hand and pointed directly at Clara. She recoiled. Mark stepped forward. Who are they? Clara's voice cracked. I don't know. Then one of the old women stepped forward. Her face was lined deep, her hair bone white. She opened her mouth, but the sound that came wasn't speech. It was a hum. The same off-key lullaby Clara heard outside her window last night. The others joined in. Mark pulled Clara back. We're leaving. But Clara was staring at the woman. I know her. What? She was at Logan's funeral, except there wasn't a funeral. But I remember her from something. The humming stopped. The old woman spoke. You opened the door, girl. Now you must walk him home. The crowd turned and walked into the church. Clara and Mark stood frozen in the street, breath fogging. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. The voice was Logan's. You never said goodbye. Click. The line went dead. That night, Clara dug through the attic. Her parents had left the house untouched after moving, boxes of memories stacked and yellowing. She found a box labeled Summer 13. Inside were drawings, childhood ones. Her and Logan mostly. But something caught her eye. A crumpled, water-stained piece of paper, her own handwriting. A game they used to play. Something she had forgotten. The goodbye game. Rules. You can only play at night. One player hides. The other says goodbye. If you don't say goodbye before the song ends, you lose. There was a drawing of them both. Logan smiling, hiding behind a tree. Her face turned away, her stomach flipped. They'd played that game the night he vanished, and she never found him. She never said goodbye. She remembered running inside when it started raining. She remembered thinking he'd come out of hiding on his own. But what if he didn't? What if he waited? What if she left him behind, and what if something else found him first? She looked back at the page. Below the rules was one more line, scribbled hastily in red crayon. If you forget the game remembers you. A knock at the door. She froze. It came again, slow, rhythmic. 3 knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. She walked to the window. The porch was empty, but pressed against the glass, smeared in wet dirt, was a child's handprint. Below it, carved into the wood of the frame, were 3 words: "Play with me." They used to say if you played the goodbye game wrong, you'd forget the rules, and something else would remember them for you. Clara couldn't stop shaking. Her breath fogged against the glass as she stared at the child's handprint on the window pane. The words beneath it, "Play with me," were etched into the wood with something jagged, like a rusted nail or a bone. The letters dripped with moisture, though the night was bone dry. Behind her, Mark flipped on every light in the house. He moved from room to room like a man trying to banish a storm with switches. "We're leaving," he said again. "Tonight. We pack our shit, get in the car, and drive anywhere but here." Claire didn't move. "It's too late." "Don't say that." She turned to him, voice hollow. He knocked. I looked. Mark didn't know what that meant yet, not really, but she could see the recognition creeping in, the dread tightening his jaw, the way his eyes kept flicking to the windows, to the doors. He believed her now. She held up the paper she'd found in the attic. The rules of the goodbye game. Written in childish scrawl. "We made this up, or thought we did. But it's older than us." He sat heavily on the couch. "It's a game, Clara. It can't hurt us." She looked down at the last line on the paper. "If you forget the game remembers you." Clara knelt, pulling another box from the attic stash. This one had photo albums. She flipped through until she found a picture from the summer Logan disappeared. The photo was faded but clear enough. Logan, standing on the tree stump by the creek. Clara, a few feet away, turned slightly like she was walking away. There was something odd about the background. A figure. Tall, wrong, hidden in the shadows of the trees, like someone had sketched it in after the photo was taken. Clara blinked. Gone. She snapped the book shut. "There's something else," she said. "It's not just Logan, or what's left of him. Something was waiting in those woods, and we fed it." Mark looked pale. "Fed it?" "We left him there. That night. I never said goodbye. That's how the door opened." He was quiet. Then, "So, we close it?" Clara shook her head. "No, it's not a door anymore. It's a path, and we're already on it." She paused, eyes dark. "Do you remember who started the game?" Mark frowned. "You and Logan, I think. I thought so too, but in the attic there were drawings, ones I don't remember making. One of them, it was of a man." She didn't want to say it. His face was blurred, no features, just a tall shape in a wide-brimmed hat. He was standing at the edge of the woods, pointing at something. At her. She tried to sleep that night, but the hum returned, low, distant, like a song played backwards underwater. She stuffed earbuds in and buried herself under the sheets, but she dreamed. She was in the woods, younger, alone. The trees whispered her name. A boy's voice echoed through the branches. "I counted to 50. You were supposed to find me." She turned. Logan stood there, soaked in creek water, lips blue, hands trembling. "You never said goodbye." She woke up screaming. Mark rushed in, but there was nothing he could do. The game had already resumed. The next morning, Clara insisted they go back to the church. "I need answers," she said. Mark hesitated. "You really think those people will talk to us again?" They weren't there by accident. St. Ivor's loomed over them like a corpse held upright by roots. The front doors were cracked. The air smelled of mildew and old wood. No one else was inside. Until they reached the back. The choir room. 7 chairs arranged in a circle. a candle lit in the center, and in the nearest seat the white-haired woman from before. She didn't look surprised to see them. "You came back," she said. Clara stepped forward. "What is this?" "Who are you?" The woman gave a thin smile. "Caretakers. That's all we ever were." "Caretakers of what?" The woman looked toward the window, where the creek could just be seen glinting through the trees. "A promise. A boundary," Mark spoke up. "Why was Logan taken?" The woman looked at Clara. "Because she forgot." Clara stiffened. "I was a child." "Yes, but the game doesn't care about age, only about rules, and you broke them." She stood. Her eyes were clouded with cataracts, but she seemed to see more than anyone ever should. "You left him in the woods, alone. The game asked you to say goodbye. You didn't, so it did what it was made to do. It took." Mark asked, "What is it?" The woman's voice dropped. "A remnant. A thing bound by words and belief. Something once human, long ago, before the creek was named, before the first church bell rang." Clara's voice trembled. "Can it be undone?" The woman studied her. "Not undone, but redirected." She handed Clara a folded piece of paper. On it was a map, the woods, a path marked in red, at the end a circle, the hollow. "This is where it waits," the woman whispered. "Where he waits." Clara stared at the map. "What happens if I go there?" The woman's expression was unreadable. "You play again. And this time, you finish the game." She turned back to her chair. The candle between them flickered. "Go at dusk," the woman said. "Games end in the dark." Back in the car, Mark gripped the steering wheel like it might float away. "You're not going in there alone." Clara nodded. "I know." But she wasn't sure if he'd be able to follow her all the way. The hollow wasn't a place on any map. It was a feeling, a memory made real, and some memories didn't want to stay buried. As they drove back, she glanced out the window. On the edge of the woods, just before her house came into view, she saw him. A boy, soaked in water, smiling. He raised his hand and waved, then vanished into the trees. The forest didn't begin at the tree line. It began much earlier, inside your ribs, when the silence thickened and the shadows forgot how to stay put. Mark didn't sleep. He lay beside Clara in the brittle dark, listening to her breathing, counting every creak in the floorboards. Outside, the trees rustled without wind. At 3:13 a.m., the house groaned. Something shifted downstairs. Mark reached under the bed for the crowbar. He didn't believe in guns, not until a week ago, and now even steel felt like a joke. But it was something. A name in your hand when everything else had forgotten you. He padded barefoot down the stairs. The air had a sour weight, like something had crawled out of the walls. The front door was ajar. He froze. There were muddy footprints, small, bare, and leading into the house. He followed them through the hallway, past the kitchen, past the old piano Clara hadn't played since Logan died, and ended at the guest room. The door creaked open. Empty. Except for the closet. A whisper. Not a voice. Not really. Just the shape of a voice. Like it had been folded and put away in the wrong drawer. "Come find me." Mark opened the closet. It was empty. But the air was colder inside. And something smelled wrong, like wet leaves and pennies. He backed out slowly, locked the door, and pushed the dresser in front of it. The footprints were gone when he looked back. By morning, Clara had made up her mind. They packed flashlights, salt, matches, and the little red pouch the old woman gave them at the church. It was tied shut with twine. No one told them what was inside. "You sure we shouldn't open it?" Mark asked. Clara shook her head. "It only works if you don't know." He didn't argue. They parked just past the old logging road, where the trees bent slightly inward, like they were whispering to each other about the humans who'd come to die. Clara unfolded the map. The red path glowed faintly in the shade. "It's a mile, maybe less." They started walking. No birds, no wind. Mark said, "It feels wrong." Clara nodded. "That's how you know you're close." At the halfway point, they passed the stump. It looked older now, rotted at the edges, split in the center like something had clawed its way up through it. Mark bent down and picked up a rock, flat, oval, etched with a child's name. Clara, he whispered. It wasn't hers. It was another Clara, dated 1962. There were other stones beneath the leaves. Logan, Benjamin, Elsie, names and years like crude headstones. All the children who had ever played. Clara's hand shook. They keep coming back, she said. Even after the town forgets. Mark looked up. We don't have to keep going. But she did, and he followed. The hollow wasn't a place. It was an absence, a circle in the woods where nothing grew. No moss, no grass, just earth packed flat like something had sat there for centuries. In the center was a door. It wasn't attached to anything, just a wooden doorframe standing upright, carved with symbols older than the town. Older than English. The air shimmered around it. Clara stepped forward. This is it. Mark pulled her back. What if stepping through is what makes it real? She touched the door, but didn't open it. Instead, she set the pouch on the ground, untied it, and spilled the contents into the dirt. A child's tooth, a black feather, a matchstick, a bone button, a scrap of red flannel. They arranged themselves into a rough circle. From behind them, a sound rose, whistling, low, tuneless. The sound children make when pretending not to be afraid. Mark turned. There, at the edge of the hollow, stood Logan, but not as they remembered him. His hair was wet, eyes too wide, skin too pale. His head tilted slightly, like his neck had forgotten how to hold it straight. He smiled. Clara stepped forward. Logan? He said nothing, just stared. Then slowly he raised his right hand and pointed at the door. The whistling stopped. Clara opened the door, and everything changed. They weren't in the woods anymore. They stood in a room made of roots and rot. The walls pulsed like breathing bark. In the corner, something moved. A figure, wrapped in rags, masked by moss. It didn't turn toward them, it just spoke. You came to play. Clara swallowed. We came to end it, the thing laughed. The game doesn't end, it simply moves to new players. She stepped closer. Then what do you want? Its voice dripped like sap. The forgetting, the guilt, the silence. That is the offering. Clara took a breath. Then take mine. The thing stirred. Mark shouted. Clara, no. But she reached into her pocket and pulled out the photo from the attic. The one of Logan. She tore it in half. The thing screamed. The room shook. Roots lashed the ground. The walls peeled back to show glimpses of faces pressed into the bark, screaming silently. Then light. Pure. White. Blinding. They were back. In the woods. The door lay splintered. The circle was gone. No Logan, no hollow. Just wind finally moving again. That night, Clara sat on the porch, holding the pouch. Empty now. Mark sat beside her. You think it's over? He asked. She didn't answer. From the distance, just beneath the crickets and rustling trees, a soft, familiar whistle, and then, from the old swing in the backyard, it began to sway. Back and forth, and a child's voice whispered from the dark. 50, 49, 48. Leaving Red Hollow isn't like leaving other towns. The road lets you think you've escaped until you check your rearview mirror and realize the gas station you passed 10 miles back is still right behind you. Mark drove for hours, or what felt like hours. The trees didn't change. The sky didn't brighten. Clara stared silently out the window, clutching her arms as if to hold herself inside her own body. They'd packed quickly. A duffel bag, the last of the red pouches, and the crumpled letter found beneath Logan's mattress. It waits under the church. Don't lie to them. Don't bring it home. By the time they reached the county border sign, the car engine sputtered. The dashboard flickered. Then, nothing. Dead. Mark swore and hit the wheel. "We just had a full tank." Clara stepped out, looking at the road ahead. "Do you hear that?" Mark rolled down the window. Silence. No birds, no wind, no insects. And then, the bell. Distant, faint. A single chime, low and heavy, like it had traveled from underground. Clara turned. "It's the church." Again, Mark followed her gaze. The road twisted into a sharp curve that hadn't been there before, and at the end of it, half shrouded in mist, stood the old white church. Same chip steeple, same crooked iron bell. They hadn't left. They'd come full circle. They stood at the church steps again, this time not as mourners, but as trespassers. The lock on the front doors had been broken. Someone or something had forced its way in. Inside, the pews were overturned. The altar had been split clean down the middle like by an axe. Candle wax streaked the floor like dried veins. Mark whispered, "What the hell happened here?" Clara walked ahead, flashlight beam sweeping left to right. She stopped at the pulpit. Scratched into the wood were dozens of names, first names only, carved deep and bleeding into each other. Logan's name was there. So was Clara's. So was Mark's. He took a step back. Someone knew we were coming. "No," Clara said, her voice hollow. "They were always expecting us." In the back of the church, a trap door. Small, iron-ringed. Chained shut until Mark pried it open. The wood beneath was soft. Damp. Mold crept along the corners like fingers. Below, darkness. A narrow staircase, spiraling. Clara looked at Mark. The hollow wasn't the only door. They descended with flashlights. Each step felt like it took them deeper than physics should allow. The air thickened. The smell of dirt and sulfur seeped into their clothes. Mark's light flickered, then sputtered out. Clara's held steady. They found themselves in a chamber. Stone walls, ceiling low enough to touch, and in the center, a basin, filled not with water, but ash. Bone white, still warm. Clara approached it. Something was floating at the top. She fished it out. A cloth doll, half burned, one eye missing. The same red dress Logan's favorite toy used to wear. Mark took it. His hands trembled. "There's more," he said, pointing. Behind the basin, a narrow crawl space. Too small for an adult. Perfect size for a child. Clara knelt. She could hear something inside. Breathing. And then a voice. "You broke the circle." Mark pulled her back. "We're not alone." A shadow moved behind them, fast. Human-shaped but wrong. Limbs too long. Joints bent sideways. It crept up the wall like a spider. Clara raised the flashlight. Gone. Mark whispered, "What the hell is this place?" Clara looked at the ash basin. An altar. They climbed back up, sealing the trap door behind them with a salt circle. But something had changed. The church was no longer empty. Candles were lit. Pew benches upright. And in the front row, people sat, dozens of them, faces turned away. Unmoving, dressed in Sunday best. Suits and dresses, many stained with dirt and something darker. Mark stepped forward. "Hello?" No answer, until the bell rang again, and all at once the congregation turned to face them. No eyes, just sockets, hollow and bleeding, mouths sewn shut with black twine. Clara screamed. Mark grabbed her, pulling her toward the exit. But the doors were gone, just wall, no windows, no light. Behind them, the congregation began to rise, shuffling, slowly. A whisper curled through the air. "Stay, stay, stay." Then, from the center aisle, a child appeared. Logan, or what was once Logan. He looked older now, 10, maybe 11, but still wearing that same pale blue hoodie, only now it was soaked, not with water, but with something that moved. It pulsed beneath the fabric. He opened his mouth. Thread tore, and in a voice that was no longer his, something spoke through him. "You shouldn't have come back." Logan's lips bled, black thread. Whatever had torn through the stitching wasn't his voice. It gurgled, not from his throat, but from somewhere deeper, like the sound echoed up through his hollow chest from something buried far beneath. "You shouldn't have come back," it said again. Clara froze, eyes wide. "Logan?" The thing tilted its head, the way dogs do when they recognize a sound. A moment passed. Then it smiled, but not with teeth. Just a widening crease where lips had once been, stretching, tearing, splitting the skin until the corners nearly reached his ears, a smile that should never belong on a child's face. Mark stepped in front of Clara. "Whatever you are, stay back." The congregation behind Logan stirred. One by one, the eyeless, sewn-mouthed figures began to hum, a low, vibrating tone that buzzed against the walls like trapped hornets. The church seemed to shudder with each note, like it remembered something it didn't want to. Clara grabbed Mark's hand. "We have to run." But run where? There were no doors, no windows, only walls, and the church now folding in on itself like a paper trap. Logan stepped forward. With each footfall, the floor rotted beneath him. Wood blackened, boards sagged. Something unseen crept in his wake, hissing softly, a smell like scorched feathers and rotten fruit. He held out a hand. "Come home," the voice said through him. Mark backed away. "No." Logan's smile vanished. The whispering grew louder, swirling now, overlapping voices, some male, some female, some too distorted to recognize. Clara clutched her ears. "Make it stop. Mark, make it stop." Mark turned in desperation, scanning the room, and saw it. Near the altar, a mirror, tall, covered in a sheet once now half exposed. The glass shimmered, but it didn't reflect the church. Instead, it showed a different room, the hospital room where Logan had died. Same bed, same flickering lights, only this time Logan was standing beside the bed, smiling at something beneath the sheets. Mark whispered, "That's not a mirror. That's a window." Clara looked too. Her face went pale. Inside the reflection they were standing, another Mark and Clara, frozen, terrified, clutching each other as the Logan in that world raised a hand and pointed outward at them. And then the Logan in front of them did the same. "Now you understand," the voice crooned. "No one leaves, they only change." The congregation stepped forward as one. Mark grabbed Clara. "Go, now." They ran, not through a door, but toward the wall itself. Mark lowered his shoulder and smashed through the wooden paneling. Splinters tore into his arms, but they burst into open air, mud, rain, the night again. The church behind them roared, not with fire, but with breath. Something alive had awoken inside it, something vast and hidden. As they fled across the churchyard, the soil churned, bones pushing up from underneath like fingers clawing their way out. Clara tripped. Mark yanked her to her feet. "Come on." They ducked behind the gravestones, scrambling toward the tree line, and then they heard it. Footsteps, dozens of them. Not from the church, but from all sides. Figures emerging from the dark, some crawling, some dragging themselves by broken limbs. Children, adults, some missing faces, others wearing masks made of skin. Clara pulled the last red pouch from her coat. "Do it," Mark said. She ripped it open. The ash inside flared, bright and hot, like phosphorus, and formed a circle of flame around them. The creatures stopped short, hissing, snarling, but not crossing. The pouch had worked, for now. In the glow of the fire, Mark looked at Clara. Her eyes were wet. "That wasn't Logan." "I know," she said, "but part of him is still here. I could feel it." Mark hesitated. "Do you really think we can save him?" She shook her head. "No, but I think we can stop them from taking anyone else." They sat in the circle as the flames began to shrink. Wind howled through the trees. Somewhere behind them, the church let out a moan, a deep, rattling groan, like a dying animal refusing to give up its last breath. The whisper returned, only one word this time, over and over. "Stay." The fire dimmed. Clara looked down. The earth beneath her was moving. Something writhed beneath the soil. She reached for Mark, and the ground collapsed. They fell. Through mud, through air, screaming, and landed on stone. Hard, cold. Mark groaned, sitting up. They weren't outside anymore. They were underground. No lights, no wind, just a narrow tunnel, carved with symbols, the same ones from the red pouches, only older. Faded. Clara whispered, "Where are we?" A voice answered from the dark. Not Logan, not the congregation. Older, deeper. "You're in the root." They landed in silence that felt too thick to be natural. No crunch of gravel, no wind, no echo. Just stone, slick with damp and dust, and the faint hum of something alive pulsing through it. Clara blinked in the dark, her palms scraped raw from the fall. Mark groaned beside her, cradling his shoulder. The impact had knocked the wind out of both of them, but it was the absence of sound that froze them in place. Even their breathing felt loud. Clara whispered, "Where the hell are we?" The voice that had greeted them still lingered. Disembodied, ancient. "You're in the root." The words hadn't been spoken, not really. They arrived, as if planted in their skulls. Mark stood, wincing. "Is this beneath the church?" Clara took in their surroundings. Narrow stone corridor, arched ceiling, symbols carved into every inch of wall, some chiseled in desperate strokes, others precise, ritualistic. Blood had dried into the grooves, or what looked like blood. A low light began to emerge ahead, not fire, not electricity, bioluminescence. Pale, bluish glow seeping from fungus veining the walls. It pulsed, a slow, steady rhythm, like breath. Clara reached out. The surface was warm, the root, indeed. Mark took her hand. "Let's move. Whatever brought us here, it's not done yet." They walked. The corridor sloped downward. Every step was met with a faint whisper, not from behind, but within the stone itself. He couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was familiar. The chant from the church, only now it was slower, layered, as if 100 different voices were speaking across time, bleeding together. After what felt like an hour, the corridor opened into a circular chamber. Clara froze. There were people inside, not congregants. These were older, some draped in robes, others shirtless, marked with red ink symbols across their torsos and backs. A few had no eyes. One had no mouth, just a sealed patch of skin where lips should be. They stood motionless in a ring around a tree, a massive gnarled thing, grown from the center of the stone floor. Its bark was dark as soot, leaves, just twisted limbs that reached the ceiling, fused into the rock like veins. But it wasn't dead. It throbbed, and at its base, embedded halfway into the trunk, was a child's skull. Small. Clara gasped. Mark stepped in front of her instinctively. "Are they alive?" One of the robed figures turned, slow, controlled. He wore a half mask made of animal bone, voice low but clear. "You are the sister." Clara's blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" Another voice spoke, female, this time from behind them. "Because the pact never forgets its debt." They turned. A woman in gray stood near the chamber's edge, barefoot. Her skin was covered in spiraled tattoos. Her eyes were milky white, but not blind. They moved with intent. She approached. "I am Esra, keeper of the root." Mark tensed. "What is this place?" Esra looked to the tree. "The beginning and the end." Clara swallowed. "We're looking for our brother." Esra shook her head. "You're looking for his soul." Mark frowned. "He's not dead. Not anymore." Esra raised a hand. The figures in the circle stepped back as one. She led them toward the tree. "Every 50 years, the hollow requires a heart. The Watcher's Pact ensures the land remains sealed. Your family was chosen generations ago." Clara's knees nearly buckled. "Chosen? What the hell does that mean?" Ezra's voice softened. "The boy was meant to be the last offering, but he resisted." Something ancient awoke within him, something the root did not expect. Mark muttered, "You made a mistake." "No," Ezra said, eyes narrowed. "You ran. You broke the cycle. And by doing so, you gave it form." She pointed to the tree. "The root isn't evil, it's containment, a prison." But without the offering, the creature below found new ways to speak, to infect, to spread. Mark's mind reeled. That thing in the church, that wasn't Logan. "No," Isra agreed, "but it wears him." Clara stepped closer to the tree, ignoring the skull embedded in it. "So how do we fix it?" Isra tilted her head with a choice. The walls pulsed again. Suddenly, images flashed in Clara's head, visions not her own. Logan strapped to a bed, screaming as something invisible climbed into his mouth. Her mother burying red pouches under the floorboards, crying silently. Her father holding a rusted knife over a cradle. Clara screamed and fell to her knees. Mark caught her. Ezra crouched. "The hollow is full now. The root rots. The pact is broken," Mark demanded. "Then what do you want from us?" Ezra's eyes turned to the tree. Renewal. One of the masked figures brought forth a box. Small, wooden, blackened by age. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, was a single seed. Red, glossy, still warm. "This is the last seed of the original root," Ezra whispered. "Plant it and offer your blood. It will grow again. Seal the breach." Clara wiped her eyes. "What happens to us?" "You will live," Ezra said, "but your names will fade. The world will forget you, as it forgot all Watchers." Mark hesitated. Clara looked at the seed, and in her mind she heard Logan's voice, faint, fading. "Please, don't let me be alone," she whispered. "I'll do it." Mark turned to her. "Clara?" She squeezed his hand. "He saved me once. It's my turn." Isra nodded. "Then prepare yourself. The seed must be buried in the hollow's heart and guarded until it takes root." Mark glanced back at the tunnel. "What's in the way?" Ezra answered with a word, one they hadn't heard before, but it felt old. "The Devourer." They left the chamber in silence. Clara clutched the wooden box to her chest, feeling the warmth of the seed pulse against her ribs like a second heartbeat. Mark walked beside her, sword drawn, the same rusted ceremonial blade Ezra had handed him. Its edge shimmered faintly under the fungal light. Symbols etched into the blade hummed when they passed too close to the walls, vibrating with unseen energy. Behind them, the Watchers did not follow. Ezra's final words echoed in Clara's ears. "When you reach the hollow's heart, plant the seed, cut your palm, feed the root, do not look back." The descent was slower this time. No stairs, only slick stone and winding tunnels, narrowing as they progressed. The bioluminescent glow thinned. Soon Clara and Mark walked by instinct, guided more by the whispers crawling along the walls than by sight. Mark broke the silence first. "I don't trust her." Clara exhaled. "Neither do I. She gave us a choice that wasn't a choice." "That's how rituals work." Mark stopped. "So we just do this? Bury some cursed seed, bleed a little, and hope the world doesn't end?" Clara turned to him, her voice steady. "I do this so we can see Logan again." Mark stared at her. There was no fire left in his eyes, just grief, worn down to something cold and sharp. He nodded once. "Then let's get it done." They pressed on. After another hour, the path dropped sharply. They slid down a moss-covered incline and landed in a vast hollow cavern, larger than any cathedral, wide as a stadium, and so dark it felt endless. "I thought there wasn't a cathedral." "Wait, yes, so it's a whole Sicily church." Mark stared at Markowitz. The stone floor was cracked and pulsing with faint red veins, like a heartbeat struggling to resume. In the distance, something moved. Clara instinctively stepped back, almost dropping the box. Mark lifted the blade. Then, the chanting began. But it wasn't human. Low, guttural, like insects clicking in unison, thousands of tiny throats vibrating in a dissonant hymn. From the far end of the cavern, it emerged, not walking, not crawling, unfolding. The devourer was not one thing. It was many, limbs, eyes, mouths, stitched from dozens of human forms, merged into a single undulating mass. Each face bore a mask, some cracked, others melting. All wept blood. At its center was a rib cage fused open like wings, and within that cage a child's form, motionless, pale. Logan. Clara's heart stopped. "No." Mark stepped forward. "Izzy," the devourer hissed. Voices erupted from it, voices they knew. Their mother, their father, their own voices, screaming at them. "Let him go," Clara cried out, but the devourer only writhed. Suddenly the cavern began to collapse inward, walls melting like wax, ground buckling. The hollow was reacting to their presence, or to the seed. Clara fell to her knees, struggling to steady the box. Mark turned, pulling her up. "Now! Where's the heart?" Clara looked up, saw a crack in the earth at the very center, surrounded by thorned roots, bleeding sap. "That's it!" They ran. The devourer lunged, its body slithering like a serpent of flesh, screeching in languages long dead. Its many limbs clawed at the stone, pulling it faster. Mark reached the crack first. The seed. Clara knelt, opened the box. The seed inside glowed bright red, steaming slightly. She pressed it into the soil. It sank in with no resistance. The roots shivered. Clara drew in a breath, raised the ceremonial knife. Her hands trembled. Then a voice behind her. "Don't." She turned. Logan stood 5 feet away, outside the devourer's form. Unharmed. Alive. His eyes were wide, scared, but lucid. "Clara, please, don't hurt it." Mark's grip tightened on the blade. "Clara, that's not Logan." But it was. His face, his voice, the scar under his eye from falling off a bike when he was 6. "Don't plant it," Logan whispered. "You'll kill me." Clara froze. Her hand hovered over the soil. The seed pulsed. Behind Logan, the devourer recoiled, shuddering, almost afraid. Clara's mind spun. Was this the truth? Had they been lied to? Were they murdering something that was still Logan? Mark raised his blade. "Back away from him." Logan looked at him and smiled. Teeth elongated, pupilless eyes blinked sideways. Clara screamed, driving the knife into her palm. Blood splashed over the soil. The seed ignited. A roar shook the chamber. The devourer screamed, not in rage, but terror. It lunged. Mark tackled Clara, shielding her with his body. The ground exploded. Light poured from the crack, blinding white and red and gold. The tree from the root chamber burst forth, its trunk rising like a spear of living bone, tearing through the cavern. The devourer was impaled mid-lunge, writhing as the tree drank its form. Clara lay motionless. Mark groaned beside her, bleeding from his temple, and in the silence that followed they heard a heartbeat. The seed had taken root. But something was wrong. From the base of the tree, the earth split again. A black tendril crept forth and wrapped itself around Clara's ankle. You don't feel the root taking hold until it pulses where your heart used to be. Clara opened her eyes. Above her, a crown of roots formed an arch, glowing faintly in the residual light of the seed tree. The cavern no longer rumbled. The devourer had vanished, its vast body absorbed into the twisted bark, sealed beneath earth and silence. But something else had taken its place. The tendril. It was still wrapped around her ankle, black, glossy, and pulsing with a slow rhythm. Not hostile, not yet, but connected, alive. She jerked away, but it followed, slithering lazily, never quite releasing her. Mark sat against a nearby rock, dazed, one eye swollen shut, blood drying at his jawline. When Clara scrambled over, he looked at her, bleary-eyed. "You okay?" Clara nodded slowly, though her breath came in short bursts. "I think It's over. Mark looked at the tree, the massive structure growing from the center of the hollow, splitting the ceiling. Pale bark, twisted limbs, and a heartbeat at its base. Where the devourer had been, only fragments remained, bone dust, cracked masks, and crimson moss. "No," Mark muttered, "it's just changing." He pointed to her leg. Clara froze. The skin above her ankle, where the tendril had touched, was marked. A branching pattern like a tree's root system now bloomed under her skin. Dark red and slightly raised. It pulsed. "Shit," she whispered. I didn't feel it." Mark leaned forward. "It didn't hurt?" "No. It should have." She met his eyes. "You think it's part of the ritual?" Mark hesitated. "I think the ritual never ended." The silence between them thickened. Clara stood shakily, glancing back toward the tunnel. "We have to leave. Find another way out." Mark nodded and tried to rise but faltered. His right leg buckled. Clara caught him. "Lean on me." Together they hobbled away from the newborn tree. The tunnel they came from was gone, swallowed by new growth. Instead, the hollow offered a path that hadn't been there before, a narrow corridor lined with bone-white bark and softly glowing mushrooms. They entered. The air shifted instantly, warmer, sweet and fetid, like overripe fruit. The walls pulsed with veins. The deeper they moved, the more unnatural it became. Voices echoed, whispers in languages they didn't know. Mark flinched. "Did you hear that?" "Yes." A child's laughter followed. Soft, familiar. "Logan." Clara froze. No, he's gone. Mark grabbed her wrist. "It's a trick. Just keep moving." But the laugh came again, this time closer. Suddenly the corridor bent, then opened into a wide circular room that hadn't been carved by hands but grown. Root columns rose into darkness, and in the center stood a well. The whispers converged into one voice, Ezra's. "Look inside." Mark shook his head. "We don't play their games." But Clara had already stepped forward. Drawn like a moth, she peered over the edge. No water, only reflections. Of herself, but not her present self. Her arms were bark-covered, her eyes glowed with a pale green. Her skin was threaded with vines. She screamed and stumbled back. Mark caught her. "Clara, what is it?" She couldn't speak. Inside her, the tendril pulsed once, then again. The voice returned. To leave the hollow, the seed must bloom. Mark raised his blade again. "No more riddles." The tree roots above twisted. A figure emerged. Ezra, but not flesh. She was part of the wood now. Eyes like polished amber, limbs elongated, hair tangled with moss. She hovered above the ground, gliding across the bark. "Clara has been chosen," Ezra said. "You cut your palm, you fed the root. The pact is sealed." Mark stepped between them. "She didn't agree to any of this." Ezra's voice remained calm. "But she bled willingly. That's all the hollow needs." Clara swallowed hard. "What happens now?" Ezra's smile widened unnaturally. "You become the vessel. The hollow must have a voice. You will carry the new root beyond this place. Let it grow. Let the world remember what it tried to bury." Clara's head throbbed. "No," she whispered. "That wasn't the deal." Ezra's expression hardened. "You think rituals care about your understanding? This is older than you, older than memory. You came to wake a god, and now you're its tongue." Mark stepped forward, blade raised. "We're leaving, now." The bark behind Ezra shifted. This watcher stepped through the walls, faceless, draped in robes stitched from human skin. Their hands were twisted into claws. Ezra raised a finger. The watchers advanced. Mark screamed, "Run!" He slashed at one, the blade sparking against its bark-hardened flesh. Clara grabbed the box, the now empty box, and bolted into the tunnel behind them. The walls screamed as she passed. The tendril at her ankle tightened. "Don't run," it whispered. "Grow." She ignored it. Behind her, Mark fought viciously, his grunts, their snarls, steel against bone. But then, his voice, "Clara, go!" She hesitated, then kept running. The tunnel forked. then split again. Roots throbbed on the walls. The symbols she remembered from the ritual altar pulsed and glowed. Some were drawn in blood, others in shadow. She took a turn blindly, and suddenly the tunnel opened, a stairwell, stone, human-made, and above it, light, real light, daylight. Clara cried out. She climbed. The light grew brighter, warmer. She emerged from a crack in the earth into the forest, but it wasn't the same. The trees were twisted, the sky bled rust, and far in the distance, on the horizon, a new tree stood, just like the one below. Reaching for the clouds, Clara stumbled between the twisted trunks of the trees. The air outside the hollow should have been easier to breathe, but it was thick with the pungent smell of rotting leaves and bleeding sap. With each step, her heels dug into the dirt, which felt like human skin, soft, moist, and sickeningly warm. She looked down at her shins. The roots were still there, spreading to her knees, flickering under her skin like a network of reversed veins. The wind whistled past her ears, carrying a childish laugh. There it was again, Logan's voice. "You know." A whisper came from the clearing. "Sometimes trees don't need light. They just need something to grow through." Clara gritted her teeth, screaming helplessly, "Shut up!" And then, from the middle of the bushes, a limping figure emerged. She took a step back, but realized it was someone, a real person, an older woman, her hair tangled like dried vines, wearing an old army jacket frayed to the seams. Her face was ashen, but her eyes sparkled when she saw Clara. "Good God," the woman muttered. "Finally, someone with a mark." Clara stepped back, clutching the rusty dagger she'd picked up from the hollow. "Who are you?" "Call me Dawes if you want a name," the woman said, stepping forward slowly, as if afraid Clara might break at any moment. "I was like you. Rooted, ran." Clara stiffened. "No, not possible." "You think you're the first?" Dawes chuckled. "The monster in the hollow has lived for centuries. It sows its seeds. Each era a person is chosen. A new trunk grows from flesh and memory." "What about Mark?" Clara asked, her voice breaking. Dawes bowed his head. "If he is alive, the hollow has taken the best part of him. No one escapes the ritual intact." Clara tightened her grip on the knife. "I don't let it control me." "It's not you who control that root," Dawes whispered, his eyes fixed on Clara's feet, where the crimson pattern bloomed under her skin. "It's when you stop being human." Clara turned to leave, but Dawes called after her. "But there is a way." Clara stopped. "There is a community," she continued, "of those who survive the ritual, who are not quite human, not quite trees. We live on the edge, where the light doesn't reach, but hollows can't yet take root." "Why should I believe you?" Clara asked. Dawes smiled coldly. "Because if you don't go, you'll start hearing voices in your head. You'll see memories that aren't yours. You'll grow wings, eyes in your shoulders. Roots will pierce your heart without you knowing it. And then you'll start singing with its mouth." Clara fell silent. The wind blew. In the distance, thunder echoed from the top of the tallest tree that had grown after the ritual. She nodded. "Lead me there." They crossed a dead clearing where the old research facility had been, now a ruin covered in red vines. An iron door had been pulled back, revealing an old spiral staircase. Clara entered without hesitation. At the bottom of the cellar was an uncertain space, part shelter, part tomb. The flickering oil lamps illuminated faces that were not quite human. Gray skin, dull eyes, hair with roots. They fell silent when they saw Clara. One, gaunt and tall as a shadow, rose, the new carrier. "Don't call her that," Dawes snapped. "She's not yet a vessel." "But the mark has blossomed," the other pointed at Clara's feet. "She's more than halfway there." Clara swallowed, feeling the roots in her heart beat slower, as if listening. "Is there any way to stop it?" she asked, her eyes scanning the room. A deep voice spoke from the darkest corner. "There is," he said, "but the price is all that makes you human." Clara stepped forward. A man, nearly hairless, skin covered in wooden scales, sat against the wall, his hands bound to a post with bloody rope. "My name is Ezra," he said. "I am the last one to refuse to transform." "And what happens?" Clara asked. "Not dead," he said. "Only to live forever with the hunger of the roots." Clara shuddered. Ezra continued, his eyes fixed on her. "If you want to break the connection, you must go to the old root, where the first tree grew, where the hollow first awoke. You must burn the heart of that tree, using your own blood as bait. That is, suicide." No, Ezra said. "That is the last choice you have." Dawes shook his head. "No one has ever returned from the old root. If you go, it will not only be the hollow that will come after you, but also older, deeper things." Clara closed her eyes, her mind reeling. "Grow," the whisper echoed in her head. "Bead. Speak for us." She opened her eyes. "Lead me to the old root." Everyone was silent. Ezra laughed. "Then get ready," he said, "because they'll know the moment you leave here." Clara looked down at her hands. The nails had turned to wood, and roots were pushing through the skin of her belly like living veins. At the end of the tunnel, where the light didn't reach, a giant eye suddenly opened in the vaulted ceiling. It blinked, and outside the hollow, 3 new trunks sprouted, towering like 3 fingers pointing at Clara. The hollow had seen her. And it was coming. The wind stopped when she crossed the edge of the clearing. No rustling, no breath of air, only the sound of her boots crunching over a carpet of brittle bones and ash-colored moss. The trees here weren't like those in Hollow. They bent away from her, blackened and charred, branches snapped off like broken fingers. This was not forest. This was grave. Clara pulled her coat tighter, not from cold, but from the weight. The weight of the eyes she couldn't see but felt anyway. Watching her, measuring her, she remembered what Dawes had said. The Kwaku isn't a place. It's a memory. Older than Hollow. Older than the people who named it. It looked like nothing she expected. No colossal tree reaching into the sky. No ceremonial altar. Just a sinkhole, yawning wide, where the soil gave way into a spiral of roots. A black well humming like an old song heard underwater. Clara stepped closer, the vines along her arms twitching as if in recognition. The earth pulsed beneath her feet. Every step forward was harder. The roots didn't want her to stop. Not now. She belonged to them. But she kept walking. Her hand gripped the knife. Not Ezra's rusted relic. This was something new. Forged by the others. The half-human survivors she'd left behind, tempered in blood and regret. It didn't shine. It absorbed light, the edge coated in something that whispered when she wasn't looking. Clara stood at the edge of the sinkhole. Below, it was breathing. She could see it. Something massive shifting under layers of earth and rot, not quite alive, not quite dead. A presence she'd felt ever since Hollow entered her skin. It had many names, the Root Mother, the Pale Memory, but to her, it was simply the source. "Are you watching me?" she whispered. Something in the pit exhaled. A gust of warm, wet air rose up, carrying with it a storm of spores that painted her face with faint phosphorescent dust. Her vision blurred, then narrowed. The world fell away. She was back in her childhood home. Not the real one. This was sharper, more vivid than memory. Her mother stood at the kitchen counter, humming a lullaby. Mark was at the table, maybe 12, biting into an apple. Clara blinked. No rashes on his arms, no fever in his eyes, no cult symbols carved into his wrists. "Mom?" she asked, voice cracking. Her mother turned around. But it wasn't her mother. It wore her face, but the eyes were hollow knots. The mouth, when it opened, revealed no teeth, just roots coiling, hissing like snakes. "You never left," the thing said sweetly. "You were always here, Clara." You were the soil. Clara tried to run, but her feet were buried. She looked down. Her legs had become tree stumps, bark peeling, ants crawling from her toes. And from above, the walls of the kitchen melted. Leaves burst through drywall, vines crawled across the ceiling. Mark stood, his face now split by a jagged wooden grin. "You're not her anymore," he whispered. "You're what comes after her." "No!" she screamed, and the dream broke. She awoke on her knees, gasping, hands gripping the moss-covered lip of the sinkhole. Blood ran from her nose. Her eyes burned. She had seen it now. The truth. The Kawaii Cub wasn't just a source, it was a mirror. A memory trap. It showed you what was lost so it could feed on your longing. That was how it grew. And now it wanted her. Clara staggered to her feet. The knife burned hot in her hand. The vines on her body began to hiss, pulling against her movement, trying to turn her back. They lashed her shoulders, wrapped around her throat, but she pressed forward. "I'm not your seed," she growled, eyes flaring. She stepped into the sinkhole. The descent was slow and unnatural. The walls weren't made of stone, they were flesh and wood, ancient and groaning. Faces bloomed from the roots like knots in a tree, some screaming, some smiling, all half-formed. Each step took her deeper into memory. She passed visions of past hosts, young women, old men, even children, all bearing the markings she now carried. Some prayed, others clawed at their own skin. All of them watched her. Deeper, until the world opened into a massive chamber. At the center, the source pulsed like a heart carved from petrified wood, veins of fire running through it. It floated in the air, suspended by dozens of root tendrils, twitching and humming like it dreamed of speech. Clara approached. The moment she did, the chamber reacted. Roots shot out from the walls, wrapping around her limbs. They didn't pull her back, they held her in place, as if preparing an altar. "Become," the chamber whispered. "Become what you were meant to be." "No," she said. "You are the final shape. You are the fruit. Let go." Clara raised the knife. The tendrils shuddered. She slashed at the root binding her wrist. Green ichor sprayed across her face, sizzling like acid. "Ah!" She screamed, but didn't stop. Another slash. Another vine severed. The source reacted violently. Screeches filled the chamber, the faces and the roots howling in unison. The ground cracked. Bark like armor crawled up her neck, trying to smother her scream. She stabbed the blade into her own thigh. The blood that spilled wasn't red, it was gold. The source froze, then slowly it turned. Not literally, not with limbs, but every nerve in Clara's body screamed that it was looking at her. A voice, deeper than thought, poured into her skull. "You are not a host, you are the heir." "No," Clara whispered. "I'm the ending." And with that, she hurled the knife straight into the heart of the source. It struck deep. The chamber howled. The world split open. And behind the walls of root and rot, something older than hollow opened its eyes. The moment the knife pierced the source, Clara thought the earth would crack open and swallow her whole. But it didn't. Instead, the chamber went still. Unnaturally so, the humming ceased. The writhing roots froze mid-air like limbs caught in rigor mortis. Even her own breath felt muted, like she'd stepped inside the pause between heartbeats. Something shifted behind her eyes, some knowledge too old for language. Then, with a low, shuddering moan, the source absorbed the knife. The blade vanished into its black, bark-like flesh without a sound. The veins of fire that pulsed across its surface went dim. One by one, the tethering tendrils retreated, curling inward like frightened fingers. Clara stood alone in the echoing silence, her arms trembling, her gold blood still dripping from her thigh. Was it done? Had she stopped it? She took a step back. The source pulsed once, twice, then split open. The rupture was silent, but it felt like thunder. From the center of the source emerged a shape, not a creature, not a god. It had no definite form, only suggestion, shifting contours of bark, ash, rot, and the shadows of human limbs and faces tangled like cord. Eyes opened across its surface, some familiar, some stolen. One bore her own face, weeping. Clara fell to her knees, not in worship, but from the sudden gravity of its presence. The thing spoke, not in words but in emotion, in memory. It showed her a truth too vast to deny. The Hollow was never just a town. It was a seed vault, a repository for chosen bloodlines, bred across centuries to become vessels. The rituals, the signs, the symbols, all leading to the birth of the rooted in flesh. Every host before her had failed, broken, given in. She was the first to endure, and now she wasn't standing before the source. She was the source. Her skin crawled, her limbs trembled. She screamed, but it came out as a burst of fungal spores. Her body began to crack, not from injury, but from blooming. Bark sprouted along her arms. Her veins shone gold under the skin. Her mouth split, and her scream echoed into the walls as a choral howl of every host before her. "No," she forced out. "I'm not you." But the entity didn't resist her rejection. It yielded. She understood. This wasn't a possession. This was a coronation. The Root Mother wasn't just the source of the Hollow. It needed choice, consent. One last offering. And so it waited. Clara stood, trembling. Her reflection blinked from 1,000 eyes in the chamber. Her dead brother Mark, her mother, Ezra, even Dawes, all peering from the walls, from the root cluster faces, watching. She reached deep into her coat and pulled out the locket, her mother's, sealed with strands of her hair and a pressed thistle flower, her last keepsake from the world outside this cycle. Clara pressed the locket into the glowing cavity where the knife had disappeared. "I offer you what's left of me," she whispered, "but no more." The source inhaled. A blinding flare of golden spores erupted around her, coating the walls, seeping into the cracked faces, the frozen vines, the earth itself. The chamber began to dissolve. Roots withered into dust. Flesh crumbled like sand. Screams rang from unseen mouths, growing distant as if receding into another dimension. And through the smoke and rot, Clara walked forward, toward light. She emerged at the base of the hill near Hollow's church, or where the church had been. The entire town was changing. No, healing away, like a husk shed by an insect. Buildings crumbled without sound. Trees turned to ash. The sky bent overhead like glass under pressure, streaked with veins of green and black. The old roads twisted, curling into spirals. Time itself seemed to stutter, lampposts flickering between old gaslight and modern bulbs, mailboxes changing shape mid-glance. People stood frozen in the streets, mouths open but silent, as if caught mid-sentence during some cosmic glitch. Clara walked among them, barefoot now, her boots lost to the rot. Where she stepped, golden moss bloomed. A figure approached from the edge of the post office ruins. Dawes, or something wearing his shape. His eyes glowed faintly, but his stance was human, calm. "You did it," he said, voice raw. "You merged." "I severed," Clara replied. "There's a difference." He looked at her, really looked at her, saw the streaks of bark along her neck, the fungus blooming behind her ears. Not infection, not corruption, but rebirth. What happens now? "I don't know," she said. "I'm still deciding." Because that's what it had given her. Choice, not destruction, not domination. A final question. Would she continue the Hollow or end it? She looked past Dawes, down Main Street, where children stood holding the hands of mothers who hadn't aged in decades, where time bled and twisted and never quite died, where the screams of forgotten hosts still echoed through oak trunks and cellar floors. "I'm tired of cycles," she said. "So end it," Dawes said gently. And she almost did. But then, a crack split the sky. Clara turned sharply. In the hills beyond Hollow, where the old mines had once belched smoke and sulfur, a new spire had risen, twisting, black, covered in vines that didn't come from the source she knew. A different root, one untouched by her sacrifice. one that hadn't agreed to be severed. Dawes stared at it too. "That wasn't you," he whispered. Clara's veins pulsed. Gold turned to black for a moment. Something else had awakened. Not the Hollow's god, but its rival. Something buried beneath even the source. A second seed, planted long ago, waiting for the first to die. Thank you for staying until the end. If you've made it this far, you've walked every dark hallway, every twisted memory, every echoing route that Clara dared to face. You've breathed the same spores, felt the same dread, and perhaps, just for a moment, wondered what choices you might have made if the Hollow called your name. Stories like this don't come easy. They grow, they infect, and sometimes they choose you. So from the deepest part of this tale's decaying heart, thank you for letting it live inside your mind for a while. If you felt something, fear, awe, sorrow, or even just a chill, please consider sharing it. Every like, comment, and whisper in the dark helps stories like this keep spreading. And who knows, the Hollow may not be done with us yet. Sleep with the lights on tonight, and remember, some roots don't stay buried. Until next time, stay strange.